Hey guys, it's Nike. I wanted to do something a little different than usual, and do like kind of like an editorial thing, because I usually only talk about like builds and guides and stuff. I wanted to kind of discuss, now that the feature patch details have been released, some of the things that I think they need to think about moving forward, in order to really give this game a better end game. The footage you see in the background is just me doing my daily. I just needed some bulk footage, so I use that. So don't really worry about what's going on. So as far as the feature patch goes, I think everything in it is a net positive. Obviously, there's a couple things that are going to negatively impact me, and there's a bunch of things that are going to be really good for me. But overall, everything is generally positive in there and in the end, and I think it's all good for the game. My big criticism, though, is that they didn't really add endgame content. It's got great quality of life improvements. Like the whole patch is nothing but one big bunch of quality of life improvements that are just really good. But the big problem is there's no new content in there. There's nothing that's going to give the game one more day of replayability than it had before, unless, of course, you never PvP'd before, and now all of a sudden you want to PvP. Well, then, of course, that's going to open up a lot of new options of gameplay for you. But I already PvP quite a bit, and I was hoping for a little bit more PvE endgame. So basically, I want to take the next few minutes to go over the things that I think that they're doing right and wrong with the endgame. And these aren't, and the fixes that I'm going to suggest aren't the type of things that they can do, obviously, anytime soon. A lot of it's really long-term stuff that might not even be implementable for over a year. But it's all things that I think would give the game a crazy good end game, and nothing that's not unrealistic. Nothing that's not unrealistic. Everything that I'm going to suggest is well within their capability to do. So the first thing I want to touch on is dungeons. For the most part, the dungeon rewards are in a really good place. When you run dungeons, you definitely feel like you're being adequately rewarded for your time. Dungeons are finally, especially with the announcement of the Karma Train Champ Farm nerf, dungeons are definitely going to be the top gold per hour thing, and that's where they should be. Honestly, the endgame content should be the top gold reward in the game, and it makes no sense that open world auto attack farming rewards more than the toughest instances in the game. And so I'm glad that that's the step that they're going. There's a couple individual dungeons that they could rebalance the rewards, like COF Path 3, SE Path 2. But for the most part, the rewards are kind of spot on. I know people complained initially about AC not being worth 1.5 gold each, but I think that time has actually borne that out correctly. If you look at the speed clear records for each dungeon path, AC paths are longer than most anything. The shortest, fastest AC path is still longer than KOF 1, SC Path 1, SC Path 3, CM Path 1, CM Path 3. So the AC paths, besides a Raw, are kind of like the longest dungeons in the game time-wise. So it makes sense that AC rewards more, and I'm glad they made that change. Replayability is kind of the big issue. I do enjoy dungeons, and I don't mind running them every day. That's like sort of what I'm to. But I wouldn't be really happy having to grind the same ones over and over again. I'm glad that they made the change. A lot of people suggest proposals for fixing replayability, such as making random things, like changing the bosses so that they're random in the dungeons and that different bosses can appear and the bosses have different mechanics each fight. Honestly, that stuff's those are lame suggestions, and for the most part, they're not really workable. It's almost impossible to balance stuff that's truly random, and that's really hard for their QA teams, and it's just not a realistic suggestion. It's difficult to program from a developer standpoint, and I don't think it's I don't think it's something that they should look to going down, and when there's easier fixes available. And also, changing the boss fights makes the dungeons more interesting temporarily, but that goes away once people learn the new fights. Like, look at AC Path 3, the end boss was interesting when they first changed it. It was a little buggy, but the fight was way different than it was before. And it was interesting to learn. But people learned the fight. They learned the stack spot. They learned how to fight them right in the middle legit. And it stopped being interesting, and it went back to just being the same boring fight. So changing the boss fights around isn't really going to solve that issue more than temporarily. A lot of people have suggested hard mode, like in Guild Wars 1, but in Guild Wars 1, all hard mode was mobs attacking faster and having more HP, and I think most people can agree that what Guild Wars 2 bosses don't need to do is have more HP. Attacking a little faster is intriguing. That's definitely something that they could do, but I don't think the more HP is a solution, and I don't think just attacking faster is worth the name hard mode. Alright, so my fix for dungeons, ideally, would be a gambit system, much like the Queen's Gauntlet, which will allow you to select different gambits to increase the challenge and reward of the dungeon. The more gambits you take, the more rewards you get. Obviously, the danger of any system like that is that people are going to figure out the easy gambits and game the system by only farming the gambits that they can ignore. Sort of like the same way that people only do the fractals that have the easy mistlock instabilities. The solution to that is to have the gold bonus from the gambits increase multiplicatively. Where doing multiple of the gambits at the same time gets much more rewarding. So, for instance, if you do the one easy gambit in a dungeon path, it might only add 1 gold or half or 50 silver to the end. But if you do 2 gambits, it might give triple the amount of bonus gold. If you do 3 gambits, it might do 6 times the amount of bonus gold. So, and then since the gambits will stack and compound in difficulty, some gambit that is really easy when it's just one of them that you can just work around might become much harder when you have other gambits to take into consideration. And the incentive is going to clearly be to stack as many gambits as possible. For the best speedrunning groups that know their stuff, they're going to want to see just how many gambits they can stack on there and still make it worth their time. And like I said, the more gambits you have, even if they're easy, they begin to make each other harder just by being compounded. Imagine the 3 easiest fractal instabilities in fractals. Pretty easy individually, right? Like, those are no sweat. Now imagine all 3 of those easy instabilities happening in the same fractal, and suddenly it's not such a joke. And that's sort of what I envision for a hard mode in dungeons that's also more rewarding and lets people tailor the experience that they're looking for. So moving on to fractals, a lot has been said about fractal rewards in a million different places, so I'm going to keep my suggestions for fractals fairly short. First thing first, revamp the dredge fractal, remove the clown car event, go directly from the bombs, guns to the end boss. That will bring the dredge fractal down to 10 to 15 minutes for an organized group, which is about in line with the other tier 3 fractals. It's a pretty simple fix and easily done. The daily loot. The gold reward should increase by 10 silver per level and not per tier. That way, a fractal level 50 rewards 5 gold for finishing. A fractal level 49 rewards 4.9 gold for finishing. Fractal 48 rewards 4.8 gold for finishing, etc., all the way down. That way the rewards do increase in tandem with the slope of the difficulty, and it's commensurate with the time that you put in. Most halfway decent pugs can do fractal 50 in about an hour, so a 5 gold end reward is not some crazy good gold farm for an hour of your time. But in addition to the drops you get and the other loot, it makes it comparable to running dungeons, which is what it should be. I also think we should remove uninfused rings from the loot table at level 26 and higher, like it was in the old system. And then you should remove infused rings from the loot table at 40 and higher. Once you're at 40 plus, there's no more need for rings. You have enough pristine relics to buy whatever rings you want, and you're getting enough shard drops to upgrade your rings as much as you want, so you really don't need it. You can use the empty space on the drop table that used to be occupied by rings and add a chance to drop ascended weapons, armor, and fractal skins, which is what people actually want. And they should replace all instances of ascended weapons and armor with the new boxes where you get to pick the stat that you want. That's much better. Same thing for skins. They should implement that skin box, let you pick the fractal skin that you want. I think they should add as a third tier fractal the old Twilight Arbor forward up dungeon path that was removed. You can shorten it a little bit. Either fix the spider tree at the end so that the spiders despawn after a wipe, or just simply end the fractal after the Vivina fight. Most people were so mad about the spider tree that they really didn't notice that that dungeon was actually really good. The Vivina fight was one of the best fights in any dungeon outside of Ara, and the puzzle section was quite good too. So there was quite a bit that could be done with that to make that a fractal, and I think it would be good. The other thing is open up a new fractal tier each month until the end of the progression is reached. I know that coming up with 10 new mist locks is a challenge for their QA team each month, but they could easily do that. That's no problem. And I know they have a limit. I think someone data mined that fractals are going to go up to level 140. Why not do that over the course of the next 2 years? 10 levels a month is not crazy. So make it happen. I mean, come on. We can even reuse some of the instabilities so long as you scale the mobs like they scaled before. I think it'd be worth doing. Just increase the drop rates for the stuff, and actually increase the drop rates as it gets better, and improve the rewards like I suggested, and it would be definitely worth doing. Open world bosses, I know they touched a lot on this in the feature patch, so some of the stuff I say might be a little bit redundant. I think Tequatl was a good first fight. It was a challenging fight, decent mechanics. People kind of figured it out pretty quickly. The rewards are a little bit on the generous side, actually. I think you get a lot of loot for the time it takes. I don't think anyone complains about that. The worm was an even bigger challenge, but the loot's weak. They could buff the loot a little bit better and reward it. The level of difficulty for killing the worm, it should probably be worth about 20 gold. And I know they're making it so it only spawns every 8 hours. So if your group fails, you have to wait 8 hours. I honestly think a 20 gold reward or loot worth 20 gold is not unreasonable for killing the worm. New raid bosses should actually be new, like the worm, and not a revamp of existing bosses. The existing bosses serve the purpose of providing an efficient Dragonite farm and turning them all into raids that most of the community won't be able to successfully complete is a bit damaging. Having new encounters that didn't exist before is a better idea for that. The mega server system is going to solve the overflow problems, and especially with the guild being able to activate it, is going to solve a lot of the problems. So the difficulty of organization is kind of solved, and that's a good thing. But I definitely think that they're moving in the right direction with that. If they could implement some of those new bosses that were tuned, maybe not necessarily for 140, but tune them to all different sizes. Have a boss that's specifically tuned for 20 people. Have a boss that's specifically tuned for 40, and figure out a way to limit it so that only your guild can get in there. I think that would be cool too. They kind of implemented my suggestion for guild missions, incorporating that. The guild raid or whatever they're going to call it. Right now, guild missions really serve no purpose other than to farm Ascended Earrings, and for, I guess, for some World v. Worlders, some Sentinels gear. What they really need to do is give more uses for the guild merits that the guild can earn. Right now, the best thing you can do is a gold find bonus and reduced waypoint costs, and neither of those are worth the influence to build. You don't really save any money with that, and it's really just not worth doing. They need to come up with a use for the merits, and I think the best use for the merits would be to have those instance raids and have those be accessible through a lot of spending of merit. So that way you want to do the other guild missions so that you have access to the guild raids. And like I said, if you have different raids that are tuned for different levels of people in the zone, then you can definitely do a little bit better in terms of finding some balance and having some interesting content and making guild missions worth doing. For solo play, I think they need to bring back the Queen's Gauntlet as a permanent fixture in Divinity's Reach. I don't think it would be crazy for them to have that as a permanent thing, but add a new boss to it every month. It would not be hard to have one guy whose job is to introduce a new boss each month. Maybe rotate some in, some out, depending on the popularity or the difficulty that they're looking to make. Add new gambits periodically. Take some gambits away, add new gambits. They should aggressively balance them. I mean, rebalance those bosses in the gauntlet every month so that there's no farms like the Deadeye farm. Or if there is a Deadeye farm, it will only last for a week before they nerf it. Or not even a week. Maybe be aggressive in balancing it and nerf it after 3 days. And then just keep adding new bosses, new gambits, and keep pushing it so that people who love solo challenging content will have an endgame all their own besides just soloing a Ra over and over again. Most of the people who enjoy soloing dungeons are doing it for the challenge, not particularly for the reward, especially not after selling the dungeons became a lot less popular with the feature patch thanks to the PvP rewards. But most of the people want the challenge for the sake of the challenge, and I think that having a permanent Queen's Gauntlet that's constantly getting new bosses, constantly getting new gambits, and has good rewards is going to be something that the solo endgame PvE community would be interested in doing. And they could introduce new titles for that, new achievements for the soloing Queen's Gauntlet. It would just add quite a bit of content that you can do solo, and I think that's what people really want. And my final suggestion is the one that's the least realistic and it's the most long-term. The best part of Guild Wars 1 Endgame was not the dungeons, it was the elite zones. Fissure of Woe, Underworld, Domain of Anguish, they were basically open-world zones, in a sense. Open-world instances. In Guild Wars 1, everything was instance. But they were open-world, and they were non-linear. When you went into the zone, you had some amount of quests, like, say, 10 quests that you had to do. And once you did all 10 quests, you got your reward chest. You could do the 10 quests in any order. It wasn't linear. You were basically plopped in the middle of the zone, and you could go in any direction you wanted, and the quests were all spread out sort of radially, and you could go in whatever order, whatever was better for you. You could do a few of the quests and get a little reward, or you could do all of them, get the big reward chest, and it was pretty good. That was a really good system, and it was quite popular. The advantage of it was that the non-linearity encouraged people to come up with creative tactics, and it added tons of replayability in that people would think of interesting ways to split up their groups and solo certain parts, and it just really added a lot. And it rewarded people who could come up with creative strategies. Basically, you could have these elite zones have the different sections. Each section should be about the same length and difficulty of a dungeon path to give it the frame of reference that I envision and the reward level I envision for completing the whole thing. The boss or mechanic of each little area of each quest should be fun and distinct. The quests and objectives can be completed in any order as an encouragement for creative splits and interesting strategies. In reference to the tradition of Guild Wars 1, there should be some cost to open the instance. Additionally, to preserve the Guild Wars 1 tradition, there should be no waypoints, and a death is a death unless you get rezzed by a teammate. If the party wipes, you should exit the zone. This will give it an elite endgame feeling, as it will punish you for your mistakes a bit more than an armor repair fee is. If a party member leaves the zone, they cannot re-enter on another character, or else they will respawn dead and have to be rezzed. In Guild Wars 1, there was a variety of ways the elite zones rewarded endgame goodies. Fissure of Woe had an armor vendor that opened up after completing one of the chests. You crafted the armor from the materials that you acquired as drops, and additionally in Fissure of Woe there were rare drops like the Chaos Axe that people loved. The Underworld reserved its best drops for the end boss chest. Domain of Anguish dropped tokens from completing each section that were used to buy extremely rare weapons from a vendor. Any of these systems or a combination of them would be fine. Some people would obviously prefer one way of doing it or the other. Importantly, though, the rewards should in some way be tradable. In Guild Wars 1, tormented weapons were tradable and sellable, and so were the tokens that you acquired with them, but they never lost the prestige attached to them, despite the fact that they were tradable. So in Guild Wars 1, the tormented weapons were tradable, and I don't worry at all that having the weapons be sellable will diminish the prestige, so long as they're difficult to get. So these elite zones would fill the gap created by providing a non-linear dungeon experience, something that's progression-based, as I assume it would be. If properly tweaked for difficulty, it would take some time to solve. So that's basically it. I think that revamping the dungeons the way I said and the fractals the way I said would be great. They will go a long way to providing replayability and suitable rewards for the fractals in the dungeons. And I think adding open world and solo stuff would be good as well. Endgame for those groups, and not hard to do since they already have the infrastructure of the Queen's Gauntlet in place. And then lastly, I think they should introduce an entirely new endgame PvE type, the elite zones, where they'll have very challenging open-ended quests that lead to the top rewards in the game. And importantly, the rewards should be tradable, so that there's a money-making outlet as well as prestige attached to it. That's about it. I thank you guys for bearing with me and listening to all this. If you have any comments, I would love to hear them. Please hit me up in the replies. Thank you for watching, and I appreciate it.